Hi everyone, welcome to this Writing Center workshop. I'm Michelle Buchanan. I want to encourage you to go to the Writing Center anytime you have an assignment that you're working on, whether it's a synthesis, media analysis, or another kind of writing assignment that might not even be for English 101 composition. Might be for another class. So there's a sheet that in varying colors on the table that lists our contact information, our hours. Welcome everyone. My name is our hours and answers to commonly asked questions about the Writing Center. Very informative, fascinating stuff that you must read. And then on the back side, information on how to schedule an appointment. You can be sitting at home in your jammies and schedule an appointment online if you like to come into the Writing Center. And the other sheet lists our workshops for the entire semester. So you can see what's coming up. Peer review, focused feedback. If you've ever sort of been puzzled by feedback and or rather peer review sessions and how to get the most out of them, that this will be a great workshop to help give you tips on how to take control of that process as a writer. And you can see there's some other ones coming up that will be useful for you. MLA documentation required for all, or for most English classes. APA documentation required for many classes, speech classes, psychology, school of ed, sciences, others. And other workshops on the backside, such as integrating sources and avoiding plagiarism. So I hope you take note of those workshops and plan to attend those as well. So tonight's workshop, in which we focus on synthesis, the power of synthesis, Instructor Patty Damone has graciously volunteered to lead this workshop for us. I would ask that you give her your complete attention. So turn off electronic devices that might distract you or your neighbors around you. If you're responding to something during the discussion, the mics that you have that are scattered around on the tables, if you want to speak into a mic and hold down the button to answer a question or volunteer an answer to something or comment in some way, holding down the mic button will allow you to be heard all over the classroom. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Michelle. Patty Damone. I apologize, I'm feeling a little under the weather tonight, so if I lose my train of thought, just bear with me, I'll get back to it. Tonight we're going to be talking about synthesis because this is one of the probably harder papers that students have to write about. And basically the reason it's hard is because you are joining a conversation with the sources that you're using. So we're going to talk about, this is subtitle tonight, it's all about relationships, because it's a relationship between not only your sources, one to another, on how they agree with each other, how they diverge from one another, but it's also intermixing with you and what kind of evaluation you're making on the material that you're reading. So what is a synthesis? It's kind of like a puzzle because you're taking an idea or a concept. Say, for example, the concept of epidemics. And you are going to be looking at epidemics maybe throughout the ages and how society has reacted to them. So you're taking one idea and you're seeing how that idea carries over and kind of fits into other sources. And what the synthesis does, it interweaves the knowledge you have with those sources in the aim of creating something new, your synthesis essay. There's a difference between summary and synthesis. It's often really helpful to write a summary of the source before you try writing a synthesis because the summary will help you truly understand what the source is talking about. When you write a summary, you want to pull out the main message but you want to restate it in your own words. And the reason you do that is if you can read an idea and translate that idea into your own thoughts, you have absorbed that idea, and it shows that you have understood that idea. You don't want to use details and examples when you write a summary. You don't want to put personal opinion in a summary, because the summary is focused on the work you're reading only. And your purpose is to restate those ideas so that it shows you have understood those ideas. The synthesis is different in that it combines the ideas from those sources. It does include facts, statistics, examples, and details to prove your point. It includes your opinion of what it is that you've read. And the purpose of the synthesis is not to just restate who said what, but to create a whole new conscious application of the strategy of pulling those sources together to see how they are interacting and working with one another. Please also, if I say something you don't understand, feel free to raise your hand and stop me, and I will be glad to explain further. So, as I said earlier, it's wise to summarize before you attempt synthesizing, because that summary makes sure you will understand everything about the original source, and you can accurately represent that source in your writing. So, when you synthesize, you want to make connections sometimes between ideas, sometimes among ideas, depending on how you are approaching your topic. But basically what you're out to do is to understand the relationship among the ideas that you're looking at. Now you can relate texts one to another. You can look at short pieces of sources and relate ideas one to another. Or you can take pieces of information from one source and apply it to a differing situation, where you forge connections or explore relationships. So let's take this first topic, what led to the Gulf War. Well, if you read a history text, the causes of the Gulf War are going to be different, slightly, than if you read about the causes of the Gulf War in a political science class. One might concentrate, or an anthropology class. The anthropology class might focus on what happened to the people in that experience. The history class might rely more on what military tactics were used, and the political science class might explore the politics behind the war itself. So, as you're looking at these sources that are talking about the same thing, they're all talking about the Gulf War, but they're all coming at it in different ways. Sometimes their ideas overlap. Sometimes their ideas might diverge from one another. So even if you would look at something like social media, Facebook, and your question was, is Facebook dangerous or not? You're going to find opinions out there who say, yes, it is. You're going to find opinions out there who say, no, it isn't, it's a great thing. And you're going to find people who are in between and say, there are some dangers, there are some positives, and they may even go into a different direction about the need for connection in today's society. So you're looking at sources that all talk about the same thing, but they're coming at it in a different way. There's usually two types of synthesis. There's the explanatory synthesis, and there's the argumentative synthesis. And you want to make sure before you start writing that, you know what it is your instructor is asking for. Because if the instructor is asking for an explanatory synthesis, you are simply going to recount what your source has said. Your purpose is to provide information using paraphrase, summary, and quotations, and you are emphasizing certain aspects of that text. You are not including your opinion, detached and objective, and you are simply a conveyor of information. Basically, you just present the information without inserting your judgment. Your purpose is just to inform. If your instructor is asking you to write an argumentative synthesis, on the other hand, this is where most of you will be working in freshman composition. You are going to be entering the conversation with your sources. You are no longer just there to provide the information of who said what, but you want to have an opinion about the topic that your class or you are examining. But you're still going to have to go back to those sources and draw information and facts and statistics and details to prove what it is that you want to say. So you'll seek those things out from the sources, you'll evaluate the ideas of those sources, but you're going to use that material in your argument. The sources will become your support for what you have to say. Now, synthesis purposes, again, as I said, can be multiple. Sometimes your instructor will have you comparing ideas among texts or among sources. Sometimes your instructor might say, look at these sources and tell me how they contrast. So you want to be very clear about what it is that your instructor is asking for. Maybe your instructor has given you a definition, let's say, for example, of democracy. And you've read some texts. Democracy is a hard topic to define. So you'll read all those texts, and you will come up with your definition of democracy, then based upon the ideas of what you've read. You, again, I said you use examples and details from those sources to support your opinion. Sometimes you might be asked to take the cause and effect of one situation and apply it to another. You might have read about all the causes of the Gulf War. Your instructor might ask you now to apply those causes to the war in Iraq. How does one idea apply in a different context? You might be asked to take the idea of homelessness, explore that topic in large cities like Los Angeles and New York City, and then apply it to the community of the Maine. You can also look at synthesis in terms of, is there any gap in knowledge? In everything that you've read, is there something that you're thinking that nobody's addressed yet? That maybe you need to bring up because it's an important topic for discussion. And we'll look at an example of that when we do our worksheet here in just a moment. You can think of synthesis in a very basic way. Let's say, for example, you read 4 sources. So say you're going to invite those authors to dinner. Think about who would sit at the dinner table beside each other and probably agree with one another. Who might sit across the table and frown at those two who are agreeing with one another? Whose ideas overlap? How do they overlap? So you can think of this in some very real terms. Think about the last time you had a large dinner with your family at home and the topic of politics came up. Or the topic of religion came up. Who's going to agree with one another? Who might have a differing opinion? So this is what we're thinking about when we're thinking about synthesis. We're thinking about all of these ideas out there that are the same topic, but they differ. Remember, when you're writing a synthesis, you have to have a purpose for doing it. You have to show connections. It's all about relationships. But You want to find out if your instructor just wants contrasting ideas. Does the instructor want you to join concepts? Do they want you to just identify emerging patterns about a particular topic? And then your purpose in writing the essay is to advance knowledge. You want to share what you discovered, or demonstrate gaps in knowledge that you found as you were looking at these ideas and those topics, or show how ideas can apply to various situations that are different from the ones you read about. Some steps to doing a synthesis, as I said, understand the assignment, because the synthesis can have many purposes. So ask your instructor, what is it you want us to do with this synthesis? Are you asking us to do an explanatory synthesis where we just explain what the sources say? Are we doing an argumentative synthesis where we begin going into the conversation? What is it you want us to do? Then you want to read carefully and actively. There are statistics out there, and I failed to bring my little chart with me, but if you hear something, later on in that day, you'll be able to recall about 92% of it. The following day, that percentage drops down to about 82%, and the next week, that percentage is down near 75%. If you work with something, if you're writing about it, if you're interacting with it, if you are taking notes, what you learn that day will be with you at about 98%. Later that afternoon, it'll drop down a little bit to maybe around 95%. The following day, it'll be 92%, but the following week, it'll still be in the upper 80s. So you remember better when you interact and do interactive reading by taking notes, by highlighting, by just taking 5 minutes and saying, okay, I read this, what was it about, what was his or her main point? Why am I supposed to remember here? And then you want to look for those connections. That's where the summary of each source, you can read the summary quickly, and then you can decide how are they connecting with one another. What relationships are you seeing? What main points do you see crossing over with one another? It's kind of like a compare and contrast, but instead of just dealing with two, you're dealing with multiple sources and oftentimes yourself in that conversation. Some synthesis questions that you want to use after you have written your essay is, have you made it clear to your reader you are talking about relationships? Have you used transition wording like Smith supports Jones's observation in that Smith says, or Brown contends the opposite of Smith? Is your voice in that conversation? Or do you let the sources take over? Do you rely on one source more than others? This should be a balanced presentation with all voices being heard, just as if it were in a conversation. And then finally, because you are using sources, you need to have a works cited page. And that works cited page should include all of the sources you referenced in your paper. You don't want to use anything in your paper that you don't put in the works cited page, because that's a kind of plagiarism. You don't want to put anything in your works cited page that you haven't used in your sources, because your instructor will say, okay, they read that, they've got some ideas, what ideas came from that source. So you want to make sure what's in your paper is on your works cited page, and what's on your works cited page is also in your paper. Okay, so let me stop here and ask if you have any questions about anything that I've said up to this point.
Should we go ahead and distribute the handout?
Yes.
Okay.
Scott is going to come around and distribute some handouts for you. The first ones we're going to look at are the ones with the typing on them. The one with the map, we're going to save that for after looking at these sources, a kind of after discussion tool. We have some sources here that deal with the topic of sports. And what we're going to be looking at is 3 little excerpts, 2 paragraphs and 1 page of writing about sports. Then we're going to synthesize this information. We're going to look at how these sources agree, where they disagree, how they disagree, is there any gap in information in any of them. So, as they're coming around, the first thing I'd like you to do is we're going to be looking at the article entitled Sports Only Exercise Our Eyes by Sidney J. Harris. And what I'd like you to do is actually become an active reader here by not just reading this, but by going through and I practice what I preach, underlining, taking notes in the margin, reading a paragraph and just in the margin writing a brief note, what was that paragraph discussing? It seems like in the beginning that it's going to slow you down, but in actuality it's going to save you a lot of time. Because when your instructor asks a question in class, while everybody else is going back and trying to reread the whole thing, you can quickly scan down through your notes and say, oh, here's the paragraph where he talks about the problems of watching sports. Or if you're studying for an exam, you don't have to read the whole thing again. You read your notes, you read the information that you cited as important. So it seems like it's going to slow you down at first, but in the long run, it's going to actually save you time by becoming an active critical reader. So let's take about, it probably won't take us 5 minutes, but we'll go ahead and start with 5 minutes. And let's read this excerpt, Sports Only Exercise Our Eye, and then we'll talk about this source. Oh, that's fine. Oh, okay. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. I just need to know which one's next. All right. Going to help you as we discuss this piece shortly. Anybody need more time getting through the first page? Anybody out there? Okay, let's take a look at that first page and talk about sports only exercise our eyes. If we look at the opening sentence, it tells us an important thing about this author. He says, before I proceed a line further, let me make it clear, I enjoy physical exercise and sport as much as any male. So that tells us he's not out to bash sports. He likes sports. But then we're going to look at his problem with current day sports. What is it that puzzles him about sports today? He's writing this article because something's bugging him. What's he puzzled about or upset about when it comes to the topic of sports? Yes, madam. Oh, yes. It looks like it died.
By the obsessive interest in sports by males in particular.
Okay, the obsessive interest in sports. What should sports be according to him? And generally, when your instructor is asking questions, usually they go through the assignment from beginning to end, and sometimes they'll go back. But he says that there's a real obsession in American society today by American males with sports. What's the problem with sports? What should sports be versus what it is compared to him? Thank you, sir.
People should participate, not just watch.
Okay, people should participate and not just watch. And if we look at the, and he's going to get to that shortly. But one of the things that he's kind of talking about here is that people should participate. People shouldn't just watch sports. In fact, if we look at that fourth paragraph, the one that this strikes me, let's look how his tone changes here. Look at the words that he's using. Enormously adolescent, retarded, presumed adults. How has his tone changed now? He started out saying that I like sports. But he's changed his tone. What makes him angry to change his tone?
May we have somebody over here?
Yes, madam.
He quotes in the article,
Could you grab the mic? That'll help. So the distance people can hear. Thanks, and just hold down the mic button.
He's upset by the almost obsessive interest in sports that the average American male is given.
Okay. Let's take a close look at that thought right there. At the ending sentence in the previous paragraph about athletics is only one strand of life. He says if American men are not talking business, they're talking sports. or they're not talking at all. So that recaps the idea that they're obsessed with sports. And then he starts moving on to the point why they shouldn't be. In the next paragraph, where his tone shifts to almost insults, why is he, what's one reason he's upset that audiences are so consumed with sports? Why does he say men shouldn't be so obsessed with sports? Because athletes are what? Idea? No. Yes, madam.
He says that it's kind of that like the people they support like the professional teams and stuff. Like it doesn't really matter what city they're playing for. They have no means to support any sort of team. Like there's no reason behind supporting their team.
Very insightful, very perceptive. He says, okay, here we are, we're devoting all of our time, almost all of our day, most of our conversation to these teams. And do these teams think that much about us? Heck no. First one who's going to offer them more money, they're going to move the franchise. Same way with players. They might be our quarterback now, and we might feel loyalty to that person, but if that person gets offered more money somewhere else, he's not going to say, oh, no, I can't let down my fans, I'm just going to hang around here. He says the loyalty is only one way. Let's take a look about what he calls social alcoholism. What is that? He's made up this term. He says sports are social alcoholism. What does that mean? Now, let's share the responsibility and don't leave it all to watching ladies here. Gentlemen. Sir, thank you.
I guess it would just be sort of you don't really have to think about what you're saying, you're just kind of repeating facts that you hear.
Beautiful. There's no real thought involved here. There's just a regurgitation of what you saw and what was already explained to you at least one or two times by the officials in the game. So you go to the water cooler the next day and you simply repeat what you've already heard, and there's very often no thought there. It's just a repetition of what you saw or already heard. So there's no real topics of conversation here. He says that he sees this opiate quality of sports when tens of millions of men will spend a splendid Saturday or Sunday fall afternoon sitting stupefied in front of television watching a big game. Why did we have sports in the first place? Why do we participate in sports? This is just a question and an answer. Why do you participate in sports?
Because speak up.
How about table 4? We haven't heard from table
To be active and stay healthy.
Thank
Okay.
you, sir. Okay, to be active and stay healthy. We should be out there exercising our muscles, doing these things ourselves, not sitting there screaming at the TV. You can't hear us anyway. Because that doesn't have any benefits for us. And then he says in the closing paragraph, there are 3 problems with this. Us just sitting and watching TV instead of going out and participating. What's one of the problems with that? Look at that closing paragraph. What's one problem with just sitting there watching?
It makes us mentally limited.
Beautiful, thank you, madam. It makes us mentally limited, conversationally dull, and what else does it do? He's kind of recapping his main points here. Yes, ma'am? It's ironic because why? You are right. I'm sorry. Yeah, we should be out there physically doing something instead of being physically inert watching sports. That's not going to make us active and healthy. So these are the problems that he sees with sitting there and watching TV. He likes sports, but he kind of questions, when you let it take it over your life, what does it do to you? Let's take a look at that next paragraph. Robert Lipsyte, the emasculation of sports. He's going to focus on baseball. So let's see what he has to say about the sport of baseball. If he makes a statement that jumps out at you, underline it. It's probably important. Okay, this is a short paragraph. Let's talk a little bit about this one. Is this whole paragraph about baseball?
No.
Thank you. Okay, what does he say baseball should be in this excerpt? Oh, stop.
He's saying that it basically serves as a symbol for the rest of professional sports.
Very good. It's serving as a symbol for other sports. So he's going to use baseball, but it's representative of all sports. If we look at the end of his first paragraph, he pretty much has his main point. What's the main point he's going to make in the reading that follows? We've got a section about sports too. What is it? Oh, come on, you guys. You know.
There's a hand over
I'm under the weather here.
Sports only exists just to sell products and the people that are wearing the products, I guess.
Okay, very good. They're no longer a testing ground of an athlete or a man. They exist to sell products. And he sees three problems with that. What are the three problems in the next paragraph he sees as downfalls now that sports is no longer a kind of testing ground for who's got the best skills? What kind of effects does that have? Again, there's three problems. Let's hear from somebody new.
Get in line, jump in. It's bigger.
What's one of the problems?
Our role models are spoiled fools now.
Thank you very much. Beautiful answer. Our role models are spoiled fools. What's the next problem?
That the game only exists to sell merchandise.
Beautiful. Thank you. The game exists to sell merchandise. What new store just opened up in downtown Vermillion last year?
Charlie's.
Charlie's. What does Charlie's do? Yes, ma'am, in the blue. Can't get out of it now. What does Charlie sell? They sell yoke apparel. That's what he means by holding cities and communities hostage. You have to like this team. This is what we sell. You go into Hy-Vee, you go into Walmart, you go into Charlie's, you're going to buy yoke material. And then he says, what has replaced manliness? Yes.
In your face macho-ness?
Excellent. In your face macho-ness. We have these guys now who always take time, coming to the plate, making sure they're tapping off their shoes, spending a lot of time posturing, instead of just going up there and saying, okay, I'm a hitter, I'm going to go up and I'm going to get a home run. Or if you're watching football, We always have what, a good 30 to 45 seconds of let's do the dance in the end zone, okay? We want to look at athletes for their athleticism, not for their show boating. And then finally, we've got one last example here, again from Robert Lipsyte, in a second portion of this article he's written. Let's take a couple minutes to read that article, then we're going to talk about that one. We're going to see what his problem with sports is. And let's take a look at this last blurb here. Again, they're all talking about sports. What's this last paragraph problem with sports? Is it about that it makes us just sit there, we don't get exercise? What's this take on sports? What's the complaint here? Scott?
You get nothing in return, and you really can't make a connection with anybody.
Okay, you can't make a connection with anybody. The franchises are always moving. Did we read another piece that talked about no loyalty to communities? Yeah, Harris. He also talked about the teams having no loyalty to their fan base. So his problem is the ties to the fan base are no longer exist because the players will go where the money is. So we see two of the articles overlapping. Harris and Lipsyte both talk about no loyalty in the teams or the franchises to the community that supports them. If we talk about where else do you see these ideas overlapping, or something else that you see might be a connection here? We don't go for the easy stuff. Oh, they all talk about sports. If we go back to Harris's article, where he talks about just sitting and watching, who does that affect? Does it affect the entire world?
For people watching.
Yes, exactly. It just affects the people watching. So it affects a small group. If we look at the article, baseball has done us a favor, does that just affect the same people? Those who sit and watch? Yes, ma'am.
He talks about it in much broader terms, using America as a whole, rather than talking about people who just watch sports.
Excellent. So here we have they're both talking about sports, but one is talking about the effects on the individual by watching TV. The other is talking about the effects on society, the effects on a community, how communities sometimes get held hostage, and how we get kind of sucked into the role model versus the real athlete. So we've got some ideas diverging here. Let's talk a little bit about the other website article. The one that begins with big famous basketball star Michael Jordan. Is his effect directed toward an individual, or is it directed toward society? Yes. I'm sorry? Okay, the connection between the player and the fan. Okay? So we can see this overlapping. Another connection between individuals, or if you take it a little bit broader, a connection from team to community. That might be a little bit broader. So it might be a little bit overlapping with society. Any gaps in knowledge here? He's talking about sports. Ladies, what's missing in these discussions? Yes.
A lot of the arguments center around like how men interact with sports rather than how people as a whole do.
Beautiful. We have women's basketball. We have women's volleyball. We have women who play lacrosse. We have women who play football. They're not in this discussion. So where do they fit in? How would you bring that information into this discussion with these two authors? Why are you leaving out women? Don't we sell women's basketball jerseys? Don't we sell paraphernalia for women's soccer teams? So that is something that's missing in this area of discussion. Now, what we were doing tonight is we looked at these ideas and we started to talk about how they cross with one another, where they diverge, and you can build an essay on this, talking about the effects of sports on individuals, on society. And then the last thing that they gave you was a handout that looks like a little box, a little map. When you are dealing with your sources, you can use this as a map for yourself. May I borrow that just for a second? So the way this works is source one. Okay, we read here. What was one of his main ideas? The problem with sports. Another idea, it made us lazy. A third idea, it made us intellectually dull. Then we read Lipsight. He had a problem with sports, but it was directed more toward society. And then we read the third Lipsight article, and his was individual, but just a larger little bit than the individual, maybe a community versus an entire nation or entire society. So as you are taking your notes, you can use this map for whatever source you're reading. Put it down at the top. Okay, source 1, Tom Sawyer. Source 2, Huckleberry Finn. Whatever source you're reading, and then think about those main ideas. And then as you're reading the next source, write down those main ideas. Then you can look at a glance and see how these ideas are starting to make connections or form relationships with one another. Okay, so that's what this synthesis is all about. I thank you for coming. I thank you for your participation. And best of luck to you on writing your synthesis.
So comment cards are coming around. Please fill out the comment card completely. And if you want an instructor notified that you were here, be sure to write your instructor's name down on the card in the appropriate spot. And you can give the comment cards back to Aaron when he's distributed them. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, I think that. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to take off.
Thank you for being here. You know, I would have said you called me.
I thought about it. I started
No problem.
Quick way. Yeah, I've got medication fixed, but
So I hope also. And Aaron, I apologize, Aaron, for calling you.
Oh, that's fine. It's all good. I know what you meant. Thank you.
yeah, I just thanks for segueing. Okay. Okay, there we go.